Hello and welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, our guest is Graham Hancock, and my co-host and musical collaborator is Guy Keltner of the band Acid Tongue. Hello, Guy.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, mate.
I couldn't be happier about the situation we are in right now.
Feel like Father Christmas.
You are Father Christmas right now. It's a Christmas miracle.
Well, I'm also very excited. I've seen him on many interviews on, mostly on Rogan, and I've seen the Ancient Apocalypse series, and he's a dude.
He is. I actually saved some. I went through so many of his interviews over the past couple of months, and I'm going to zero in on something he said on Rogan later because
Okay.
I'm obsessed with some comment he made a long time ago, and it's sheer brilliance, and it's just something we've got to talk about that I
Okay.
don't think he hasn't discussed it in like a decade again, but I'm ready to bring it up. So
Wow, we'll get into you. Should we talk about you first? Because that'll fill up a half an hour,
yeah, sure.
You're also an interesting character.
I try to be.
You're doing a good job. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually just played an arena last night
Wow.
with Acid Tongue. There's a hockey team in Seattle, and they hired us to be the house band.
Oh, cool.
So a bunch of stoned musicians stood up in front of we were on the big jumbo screen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean, you guys are an institution now. I mean, you run this festival.
That's right. Freak Out Festival in Seattle.
Which is your brainchild?
Yeah, it's been 11 years.
Wow.
We're the 12th edition of it will be in 2024 in the fall.
Okay.
It happens every November. It's a 4-day festival, and it features underground, psychedelic, garage, punk, and just so many other genres that we are really a tastemaker in town now and helping kind of prop up the local music scene. So it's become such a cool event to not only to produce every year, but to attend, because I actually get to, hire people to do the real production. And then I get to go out and hang out and play the event and be a willing participant.
And that's not just anywhere. I mean, that's Seattle. That does have a few bands. I can't remember the name of bands that have come from there, but some famous bands have come from there.
That's right. And some of those grunge legends, they come to the fest every year and they attend. Wow. And they love discovering new music. We bring a lot of music up from Latin America and Europe.
So because you go down to Mexico a lot. Yeah,
that's right. I'm in Mexico regularly, and I've traveled through South America, and I just have such a fascination with the musicians that are coming out of there. And, we've developed relationships with the Mexican consulate, with the press in Mexico. And so every year that we do Freak Out, we have a big chunk of bands from down there that we love to put on in Seattle.
That's so cool. I mean, what was it? Did you ever envisage it getting this big when you started it all those years ago?
No, we could barely pay our bills when we first started it. I mean, that was the case for a long time. It's always been this like really beautiful, I wouldn't call it a failure, but it's never been seen as a profitable enterprise. And then we became a nonprofit in the last year or so. And that's when things really started to click. It just suddenly made sense. And we're getting a ton of support from the city, the county, the whole community around us. So we're having this really beautiful moment with the fest, and it's suddenly being accepted by Seattle and the surrounding areas.
Wow. Is it all in straight venues, or do you have special venues for one-off events for the festival? Or?
It is. It's scattered around this neighborhood called Ballard. And so similar to South by Southwest or Tree Fort, you get a wristband and you just bop from venue to venue.
Okay.
And we take over unconventional spaces as well. So there's like a very working class members only club called the Eagles Club. And this like banquet hall they have in the top floor we use as our main stage. So
Wow.
we had some really great bands in there this past year. We had the All Laws and the Spits. They're all playing in this members only club with there's photos of the older past members on the wall and stuff like that surrounding it. And we're blasting like crazy liquid light projections all over the place. So it's a really cool, funky, weird event. And it's just so unique to the neighborhood that it's in.
Yeah, well, I can imagine it. It sounds fantastic, and it's great you're doing non-profit now. That's supporting. Where does the income go to? To which sources?
To the production itself, really. I mean, our goal is to eventually get everybody that works for us on salary. So it's not this really brutal job where we can only pay for a few hours a year per person. I think we're starting to get to this point where we're a functional operation. And that would be
Mm,
such a dream to be able to live off this a bit more because to date, we all have other jobs, and
yeah,
I have to bury myself in extra work. I'm lucky I get to work mostly as a musician
yeah,
at this point in my life, but that's a very recent development. And it still takes, there's a lot of jobs I have to take to keep going right
yeah,
now
yeah,
that I sometimes would prefer to maybe turn down, but you've
yeah.
got to do what you got to do, and I really want to make this happen.
You do. I mean, but what your passion is paying off, man.
Definitely. It feels like a really good moment right now.
Yeah. I've
Very
been
good
listening.
moment.
What are you? I see you also collaborated with the Death Valley Girls.
That's right. You're a fan of that band.
Well, we had them on. Yeah, I sang with Bonnie too on another track.
Our last record was a collaboration record. So
Hmm.
it was kind of like a mixtape almost, as I put it. We did a lot of the songs in my apartment during COVID. And then, a lot of bands like Death Valley Girls and another great band from Seattle called Naked Giants, just a bunch of cool groups submitted their recordings to us. And we went into the studio and spent a couple of weeks just mixing everything together and making it into this really cool, bizarre, awesome rock and roll record.
Yeah, it's a fantastic sound. I particularly like the Death Valley Girls because I've listened to them so much. But yeah, your songwriting is great too, and I mean, you're also having a um, what's the way to say it? A social take on things, the songs like consumerism and yeah,
It
social
was
commentary.
it was so satisfying to play consumerism at the arena yesterday because it's owned by Amazon.
Uh,
So we
mm,
ripped into that song during the in between periods of the game. And I just love screaming consumerism at this tech crowd, it was
mm,
fantastic.
yeah,
I got a nice kick out of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Bringing
Yeah.
down the system from within.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
great.
so back to Graham then. Yeah, you had a short list of people, and he's your number one choice. Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
I have been obsessed with Graham for a while. Seen his television show. I've read his books. I've listened to so many podcasts I can't even count at
yeah.
this point. And I just think he is such a fascinating individual. And I'm so inspired by what he's saying because it's truly expanded my knowledge of the universe around me,
Yeah.
and given me just a different perspective on how to look at the world, which is super cool.
Yeah. You can't ask more as from a writer than to do that now.
No, it's great. And
Mm.
I think it's given me a new point of view on a lot of ancient sites that I've been to already. Like I've been fascinated by this stuff for a long time, being from a Mexican family, traveling down there often and being, I've been to the Mayan ruins in Tulum, Teotihuacan, like the pre-Incan ruins in Lima. And so I've
Oh,
seen a
wow.
lot of these really cool sites all over the world. And then kind of revisiting them in my mind through Graham Hancock's point of view has just made it so much more interesting,
Mm.
and I can't wait to go back to some of these sites now that I've got a little more knowledge of, how he thinks about the world and some of the observations he's made about these sites. It's so cool to really see them in a different point of view.
Yeah, it's like science is caught up with him now, especially like Randall Carlson and, this younger Dryas, and explains why. Because, we all used to think like things happen at snail's pace, but he was showing like how some of these, transitions can come like
That's,
overnight.
that's right. And there's so much evidence for it. And I live in Washington State, in America. And so I know that Randall Carlson and him talked about these rolling hills in Washington State that were the product of the flooding.
Mm-hmm.
So if hypothetically some sort of object came from the sky and struck the ice cap, when it melted, as that water came out over the continental shelf, it caused these great rolling hills in Washington State that they use sort of as evidence of this possible, apocalyptic event.
Yeah, because what else could form something like that? I mean,
It's crazy. And I've never looked at my environment that way. It's nuts to even drive through our state and think about that,
yeah, no, it's so what do you think about all the archaeologists that doesn't even want to debate with him? I saw he gets called so many. He's been called under all the names under the sun, no?
I think that's something I wanted to touch on with him today, is because, he has a lot of talking points he brings up in his, interviews and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering what we can get out of him that's sort of a new take.
That would be great.
And
Yeah.
I do sort of want to go after things like that today, because I'd like to hear, who he is as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I generally have to deal with this being in the public eye, especially in Seattle. There's just a lot of negativity. And as you start to get more successful, everybody's got an opinion on what you're doing. And it's so crazy to see such a violent reaction to someone just speaking their mind, and I've had to deal with this as an artist, and on such a small level. And now that he is completely exploded in the public eye, I just want to know sort of what the consequences have been on his everyday life, what he feels like about it, how what it would take for him to feel like this has gotten through to people as well. I don't know what's next. It's very hard to believe that modern science is going to completely accept some of these theories, but there's so much evidence backing them that eventually something's going to break. And I want to know what that thing is in his mind, what evidence will be accepted by the mainstream for him to feel like he's really broken through and gotten his message across.
Yeah.
I feel like it's gotten across to me. So,
well, he's got his own Netflix series, which is more than you can say for. It's a big FU to all the scientists.
That's right. That really pissed off a lot of people too.
Yeah, that did.
And there was that big open letter after that.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm eager to hear how he perceives the modern archaeologists and what they're throwing at him lately.
Well, I mean, I heard him on Rogan. He's definitely pissed off about, the scientific community. But I tried to talk. I've had them on the podcast as well, some like archaeologists, and I had tried to talk to them and say, like with the pyramids, we hadn't even. You were telling me they made the pyramids, but we haven't even discovered the wheel. Like, so what, they just did it with pulleys and ropes and logs underneath. I mean, and then cut them. Do you know how big those things are? It's like one. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's just not feasible.
Some of those stones are like 50 cars. How did they move that? That's actually, that ties back to the point that I'm going to bring up with them later too.
Okay. Oh, right. I'm tapping into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he just said it was, they had so many slaves then. It's just so many people. You could do it. They did.
But I know it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. They just say, look, forget that we've solved that problem. Look, can you ask me about something else? Because I don't want to talk about pseudo archaeology.
I really wonder like how long they're going to hold out pushing some of these. It's just some of the theories for like this very neat and tidy version of history are starting to feel insane to me. They're seeming crazier than what he's putting out there. You know what I mean? To try and keep backing that 1,000 slaves move this 50-ton stone is just bonkers. And he brings that up a lot in his writing too, because he talks about some of the, the ancient sites in the Andes and how they're deep within these mountain ranges, you know? And so how did they get these stones that were quarried 50 miles away or something up through this mountain pass at that period of time? Like, what developed society could have done that? Like, we can barely do that.
Yeah. I mean,
You know?
Stonehenge is a couple of rocks. I mean, all right, that was difficult and that was a long way away, but things like these huge structures like the pyramids or the Inca stuff is just impossible.
Yeah. And even the masonry of it, you know, that's something I'm really fascinated by. Like those perfect spheres that they use to create the Olmec heads is so awesome. And other stuff he notes like about sort of these stone structures is the heat that was applied to putting some of these stone walls together and things. Like you can tell that a blowtorch was used of some sort. Like how did they develop this high heat mechanism and what were they using at the time to do that and to apply that heat? Like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So there's clear evidence of some sort of like developed society doing this.
I know. And these archaeologists, are experts in the ground, but Graham explains it that, when there's a disaster or something, a cataclysm like that, all metal and plastic, they get destroyed straight away, in glass, and it's only stone implements that survive through time. So that's why all we have left. It doesn't mean that everyone was using stones to do everything.
That's right. I mean, everything that's biodegradable disappears at a certain point. And so to give an apocalyptic event 10,000 years to settle into the planet, like it makes a lot of sense that most of the science would be obliterated at this point. You're absolutely right. Like that's kind of the best part about what he's saying is the mystery behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do enjoy that. I kind of like this whole idea that we really don't know minus these stone structures and we're really trying to piece it together from so little.
Yeah. Well, I think the civilization that went way back, not just began 10,000 years ago, but, has been going for hundreds of thousands of years. And we've just, if like everyone says, if tomorrow there's a apocalyptic event, we're going to go back to the Stone Age in a couple of weeks. I mean, you see all these apocalyptic movies, we're pushing up possessions around in shopping trolleys,
That's right. And these stone tools are getting dated further and further back. Like just a couple of months ago in Africa, they discovered basically a workshop underground. Like they dug up a workshop for making tools.
Yeah.
And it was 3 million years old.
Okay. Yeah.
So our understanding of the human story is just keeps getting stretched and stretched and stretched.
Yeah.
And how do you explain that and just try to explain away like that level of time, at all? And there's so few fingerprints left of that period of time. We really have to dig deep into the ground to find that.
And the carbon dating doesn't work, does it, on rocks and things like that? So
no, that's kind of why the stuff they're doing with LiDAR is so interesting, that they're now being able to map the Amazon from above. That's one of the coolest things he's been studying lately is this whole mapping of the Amazon. And they're discovering all these like sites of temples and things that are just buried under the jungle canopy.
Yeah, that stuff's impenetrable. I mean, you can't to get to those places, and it grows up so quickly. The trees will take over so fast.
Yeah, the Amazon is going to be fun to discuss today because we've got to get into psychedelics. I mean,
how much do you want to get through? We're going to go in for an hour.
Well, if we can cover psychedelics, that really is the best jumping off point for most of what I want to talk about anyways.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know he loves to talk about it, and it sort of covers a lot of things with him. Psychedelics have a lot to do with mind expansion.
Mm-hmm.
They also have to do with his points about ancient technology.
Yeah.
And, the development of ayahuasca being in itself an ancient technology.
Right.
And, he has some pretty incredible beliefs about the capabilities of psychedelics.
Yeah.
So I think it does sort of bleed into his work in a big way.
Sure.
And it's great because I'm very passionate about this. It's part of my music. It's part of my lifestyle. And I think it might be a really great point that we agree on in this interview.
Well, I'm super excited. Yeah. It's also, because, you coming on interview is so much better than me giving him it'd be another boring interview for him. But then he gets a song at the end of it. It's like,
It's too cool. I don't even
yeah,
know what I'm going to write yet, but it's going to be funny. I have some good
yeah,
ideas. I've been making some notes at home. I'm excited about this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely prepared.
I can see that. And that makes my day when you do all my work for me like this. So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a very eager interviewer today.
Okay.
That's for sure. I don't get to do a lot of stuff like this, you know.
Did you ever interview anyone else from your other?
No, it's always me getting interviewed, you
Yeah.
know, and I've done a lot of these podcasts lately, and some of them have just been disaster zones depending on the host, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
there's great ones. There's some great ones out
Mhm.
there, but there's also just a lot of people with a mic that have
Yeah.
very little to say. So you're carrying it as as a guest on this thing, and
You
that
just
can be
hear
really
yourself
difficult.
repeating your own life story the same way you've
Yes.
told it hundreds of times before. And
Yeah, it becomes very one-sided and one-dimensional. So this for me is an absolute treat
okay.
because it doesn't have to have anything to do with my music for once.
Yeah.
You know, we can skip past that part.
Yeah, but he's probably more interested to hear about your music than talk again about ancient
Oh,
civilizations.
it blows my mind that at some point, whether it's already happened or not, Graham Hancock will have or already has listened to my fucking tunes. That is so gnarly.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, that's
Maybe
very
put it in the
exciting.
if it's in the right subject, it could be about in the next Netflix series.
That's right. We'll get the tearjerker at the end when people are crying. They can show the obliteration of the old society,
Yeah,
you know, people being taken out by tidal waves, and my acoustic guitar comes in, some strings.
I can see it. Yeah, you might be putting too much pressure on yourself here. It could just be
I know.
could be a simple
James Bond theme song.
Yeah, it has to be
That's
the
a lot
end.
of pressure.
It is, yeah. Yeah. I can't believe the rest of the band's not excited to this.
They have no clue. They have no clue what they're missing. They will eventually. It's going to happen. I have no doubt about it. And they're going to be really pissed when they suddenly realize like what has been going through my head.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. I try to talk about it with them and I just sound nuts, Yeah. They're like, how much have you smoked today? Yeah.
But do you do ayahuasca as well? Have you been down there to the have you had some experiences?
I have not done ayahuasca yet. I have been mortified by DMT. I'm going to do it. It's definitely on my list, but I have taken such an excessive amount of LSD and psilocybin over the years that I'm on a bit of a pause at the moment. I'm enjoying the clarity in my life that I'm just getting with general sobriety. I still smoke pot and I still have my deep moments. Marijuana is legal in Washington.
Okay. So
it's just part of the culture out here. People are just smoking it outside of bars and restaurants and everywhere.
Okay.
And now mushrooms have been decriminalized.
Okay.
So you can even procure psilocybin legally in the state. I mean, somewhat legally. And we have mushrooms growing wild all over the place, especially this time of year. So cyanescens are the main strain that grow out here, but I have a lot of experience taking those, especially when I was a lot younger. That was a fixture in my life. So I could absolutely comment on some incredible trips I've taken. I'm sure he can too. So
it's crazy that they made nature illegal.
Right? How can they do that to us? This stuff is in our backyard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for the longest time, it's been a crime to go and pull it out of the ground and just eat it. Yeah. And the things you see and think on, I mean, that's the danger of it, is it causes you to challenge your existing systems. It causes you to question things. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love about living in the region I'm in is, at least growing up, people are very inquisitive about their environment. They place a heavy emphasis on nature. You know, I live in a beautiful part of the country where people are into the outdoors and they respect nature. And it's a big part of our culture. It's not just a trash heap to us, you know? And I think these psychedelics have the ability to really enhance our relationship with our surroundings. And that's such an important thing, but that causes you to suddenly really, you can't do that and still accept this capitalist society that we live in.
Yeah.
You know, it makes you want to tear down the whole system to do these things. And so I think that's what's really fun. You know, I loved watching Washington State stand up to the Trump administration, his entire presidency. We were constantly in the news saying "fuck you" to the man, and that to me was such a cool thing. Gave me such pride to be reading the headlines when this would be happening. You know, so it's such a fixture out here to be like that and to really question authority.
Yeah, yeah. Don't question the 4,000-year-old narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So. Generally speaking, I am very, very stoked to hear his opinions on that and that attitude. You know what I mean? I know he's been very much hostile towards the scientific authority, as we can call it, you know?
Yeah.
And I like that. I mean, the attitude's great and it does get him angry. And I've heard him in interviews getting so pissed at the reaction he's getting out of people. And it's awesome. Yeah. It's just awesome to see someone get so angry about this and to really have this, like, such a strong belief system.
Yeah, yeah. No, he does these, you know, but if you really listen to him with an open mind, I mean, you hear him on like a 3-hour Rogan conversation, like, you know, and it lays it out very clearly, and also the Netflix series. I mean, it's, you know, the objects are there, aren't they? The buildings are there. You can't argue with that.
That's right.
I mean, what's that one big, what is here? It's here from the man himself.
Hello.
How you doing?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, good. And by the way, I never rely on this technology.
It's such a pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining me. One question before we begin. How long are we going to be talking?
1 hour?
An hour is perfect.
Okay.
Let's keep it to an hour. That works well for me.
All right. Well, this is Guy from the Seattle band Acid Tongue.
Hello.
He's a huge fan of yours, and
I am a massive fan of yours.
Well, thank you. That's very encouraging to hear. Remind me of your name.
Guy.
Guy.
Yes.
Pleased to meet you, Guy.
Pleased to meet you. Oh, I can take it from here?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh man, this is great news. Graham, I have been such a huge fan for a while, and your work has totally expanded my perception of the world around me. So I've just been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. And I didn't think we'd get you on the show. So I'm really proud that we were able to get in touch and get you over here.
Well, I'm very happy to be with you. This is a different kind of discussion for me, and I'm looking forward to something different.
Yeah, that's kind of was my idea today, is that we could talk about that. I mean, to jump right in, I'm really inspired by some of your points of view on the Amazon and on the technology of the ancients.
Yes.
Specifically, some of the things you've had to say about ayahuasca. You know, being in a band called Acid Tongue, I think it's a great starting point for the conversation to just discuss your views on ayahuasca. And I think it's so beautiful what you've kind of used that as a point of jumping off point for your work to say, you know, this is evidence of an ancient culture using technology to expand their minds. Yeah. And it's really beautiful because I think that psychedelics have played such a key role in expanding my perception of the world around me. And I come from a region where I was telling our host, you know, mushrooms are now legal in Washington State where I lived. And
I'm so happy that these developments are taking place. It should have happened long ago, but I'm glad it's gradually happening. state by state. Very good.
Yeah, it's starting to really expand people's minds out here. And I think generally speaking, it's going to make a more accepting audience of the things you're trying to say, because people are starting to question the authority around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've been told so many lies about psychedelics for so long. And it's just wonderful to gradually see it changing. I mean, what's opened the doorway is the recognition by scientists that psychedelics have enormously powerful therapeutic effects. This is where medicine and science look first. They look at the therapeutic effects, and the old sort of demonization of psychedelics is being blown out of the water by the new discoveries. For example, psilocybin and post-traumatic stress disorder, or depression, and people who are diagnosed with terminal cancers can be freed of the fear of death with one powerful psychedelic experience. Medicine is beginning to realize that these ancient medicines are incredibly helpful in every way. And this in turn opens the door to what is even more interesting, is to what they have to teach us about consciousness, about the nature of reality, and about what it is to be human.
That's great, because I kind of liken the reaction that we're getting from some of the mainstream, scientific community towards psychedelics as the reaction you were getting for your own work.
Yeah.
There's this really angry response to any of this being brought up, being questioned. And I don't know what it is about the ancient world that upsets people so much, but it gets such a strong response from people. And I was going to ask you, how have you been feeling lately about sort of the skeptics? Are you getting through to people? Do you feel like you're starting to get your message across, or you're still getting this terrible reaction from the community?
I think I'm getting the terrible reaction from the archaeological community precisely because I am getting the message across. If I wasn't getting the message across, they wouldn't bother with me. It's all about control of the narrative, just as it has been with psychedelics. There are powerful figures in authority who want to control the narrative, who want to say that their way of thinking is the only way to think. And that is definitely the case with archaeology and the past. Now, if my books were not read by large numbers of people, and if my TV series hadn't been seen by tens of millions of people, they probably wouldn't bother with me. But they see me as a threat, and they try to damage me and defame me and spread lies and nonsense about me precisely in order to prevent what I've got to say from getting out there. But they've not succeeded.
I know they really haven't, because, the more this is happening, the more I generally tend to believe what you're putting out there, because it's eliciting such a strong reaction.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, some of it, I would say that the negative reaction has helped the outreach of my work rather than hindered it, because people today are rightly increasingly distrustful of authority. The leadership of our world today is so poor, so bad, so useless, so corrupt, so dishonest, and people are waking up to this in every way. And whereas maybe 20, 30 years ago, it was just enough for an authority figure to say, this is how things are, you must believe me, there's no other story. Now everybody's questioning this, or not everybody, but enough people are beginning to question it.
It's becoming easier to talk about this stuff. It went from, even just in the past year and a half, as I brought up some of your theories and some of the points you've made about ancient history, I went from having a group of people look at me and be like, is this guy crazy? Is he stoned? Suddenly it's generating a real conversation with my friends, my family. This is becoming household material now. And that's something I love about it, is I can bring this up anytime now and someone will have an opinion and may have an interesting point about it, something they've observed in everyday life, something they've read about it. It's becoming so awesome to see that it's taking on more of the norm to discuss this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And this is my objective, really, not not so much to say that people must accept what I'm saying, but to say, but for it to lead to people asking questions and people questioning the story we've been given about ourselves. And this is where the past is so important, because our ideas about the past shape how we behave today and shape the future. And if our ideas about the past are wrong, it's important that we know about this. So I'm glad that my contribution over the last 30 years has been to stir things up and to get people thinking again about issues that were considered previously to be closed.
I mean, I don't have a Netflix show, but I do know what it's like to be cast as crazy in the spotlight. I'm generally in the spotlight where I live, and it's a bit of a difficult situation to be in. And I was just wondering if that has had, sort of a negative effect on your everyday life, or if people are really just warm to you and inviting. That was a big question for me.
Yeah, what I find with the general public is that people are very warm and very kind to me, and very, very, very welcoming. And at the same time, I find myself the target of a propaganda war, which is being waged by a handful of archaeologists and their friends in the media, which is totally designed to damage me and to turn people off my work. And it's cancel culture at work. And it is painful. It is painful. I mean, for example, the Society for American Archaeologists wrote a letter to Netflix accusing my series of promoting white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, and misogyny. And these labels, none of these labels have anything to do with the series. Race isn't even discussed in the series, but they're used in a propagandistic way to try to diminish the impact that I have and that my ideas have.
It's crazy too, because you are totally promoting the idea that some of these parts of the world, Central America, parts by the equator, you're pushing that these played an important role in history.
Yeah.
And I feel that what you're doing is so the opposite of racist and misogynistic and all of that. That sounds insane to accuse you of that.
Yeah,
in general.
It is insane, but it's propaganda. And it's propaganda that can be effective. There's no doubt that some millions of people around the world have been turned off my work by this propaganda campaign, and by the archaeologists and by their friends in the media. I mean, mass media today are so uncritical. They just take the word of an archaeologist. The stories that were written about me after Ancient Apocalypse came out by a series of journalists, none of them reached out to me. They just listened to what the archaeologist said and reported it that way. I do find it has been a struggle. I do find it painful. I detest it when people suggest that I support racism or white supremacy. I'm married to a woman of color. I have children of mixed race. I have grandchildren of mixed race. These are horrible, vile attacks on me and as a person. And I'd be dishonest if I didn't say that it hurts me. It does hurt me. It hurts me a lot. But at the same time, I have the warmth and the kindness and the support from the general public for my work, which I see every time I give a public talk, for example. So I take refuge in that. I take refuge in the fact that I am reaching people and that people find what I say useful and of value.
That's great to hear. And you've used, we were talking about ayahuasca earlier, and I feel like when you do experiment with some of these psychedelics, it's very much hard to hate humanity after you've gone through one of these beautiful experiences, because That's right. Get such a bird's eye view of everything, and it just completely pulls you out of the world around you, and this hateful way of thinking suddenly fades away into the background. I know you've been a big proponent of this in your work and in the way you've spoken about it. And I know you've taken many, many trips like this. Have you done any of that sort of stuff recently, or is this just sort of a part of your past that you?
No, it's very much part of my present. My most recent ayahuasca session was in Peru just 2 months ago, with the same shaman who I first drank ayahuasca with back in 2003. 20 years later, I went back to him and had one of the most remarkable ayahuasca journeys that I've ever had. It was actually, one must make a distinction between ayahuasca and yahe, because they're often confused. They both contain the ayahuasca vine, but the dimethyltryptamine aspect in ayahuasca comes from a particular plant that they call chacruna in the Amazon. From the leaves of the plant, it's mixed together with the ayahuasca vine and cooked up. The ayahuasca vine contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which allows the dimethyltryptamine in the leaves to be absorbed by the gut, which normally it can't be. As you know, to access DMT, normally we need to smoke it, and taken orally, it's not effective. So this is one of the reasons why I speak of an ancient science in the Amazon, because amongst those hundreds of thousands of different species of plants and trees in the Amazon, they found these two, which neither of which is psychoactive taken orally in its own right, but when mixed together, produce this powerful psychoactive effect. Now, yahe also contains the ayahuasca vine, but it then contains another vine, which includes not only NN-DMT, the normal DMT, but also 5-MeO-DMT, which makes it in some ways an even more interesting and extraordinary experience, that you have a mixture of NN-DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and the monoamine oxidase inhibitor in the ayahuasca vine. And it was yahe, in fact, that I had in Peru on this journey. And the reason that I did this time is because I suffer very badly from migraines, and it's been getting worse as I've been getting older, not getting better. And I focused my intention in this session on dealing with the migraines. And it was remarkable. For more than a month after the session, I had absolutely no migraines at all. Whereas frequently, at other times, I can get them every day. So I had an immediate healing, not a permanent healing. It seems that this is a medicine that I'm going to need to take more often. But it's welcome because of the effects that it produces. It's not just a matter of healing an ailment like migraine. It's the lessons that these medicines have to teach us. I call them the ancient teachers of mankind. And of course, to a mainstream scientist, this sounds like nonsense, that a plant can be a teacher. But these plants are teachers. And they, as you say, they shift our perspective. Instead of being locked into this narrow framework that our society wants us to be locked into, which is all about production, consumption, and the ownership of goods, and so on and so forth, and where we define ourselves by what we own, we're shifted out of that framework altogether and see the human condition in a much wider perspective. And it's noticeable with the plant medicines that amongst all the other experiences they unleash, they also provide moral teachings. They teach us how our acts and our words can hurt other people, and they teach us not to do that again. I've definitely learned that my words can sometimes be very hurtful to others. And ayahuasca has shown me that pain from the other person's point of view. And it made me think much more carefully about what I say to people. Not just lash out in anger suddenly, but think carefully. What if I say these harsh or cruel words to that person, what's the effect it's going to have on him or her? So it's changing the way I function in the world.
That's beautiful. And one thing that you made a point about, I heard it in an interview that you gave a long time ago, and I absolutely loved it. But for the longest time, I have been completely perplexed by how they've moved these massive stones, whether it's some of the ruins in the Andes, or the pyramids or whatever it is. And at a certain point during an interview, you were talking about how it could be possible that through the use of psychedelics, that perhaps a society could have used like telekinesis or some use of their mind to move these massive stones. And it just struck me so hard. I mean, it's not such an insane thought when you've taken this stuff. Yes. You know what I mean? If you've not taken it, it sounds crazy. Yeah. But if you've been through one of these trips, if you've done it, you can see a society getting together. Do you still have any, I mean, what are some of your theories for how they moved these massive stones through the Andes, and how they could have, I love that, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting thing because in the hundreds, actually thousands of pages of my books, I've only probably written 5 or 10 pages, which are about the possibilities of telepathy or telekinesis being involved in ancient societies. But those who are waging the propaganda war against my work pick on those 5 or 10 pages and use them to say that Hancock is a lunatic. He believes that human beings could move things with the power of their minds. Well, it's more a matter of suggesting this possibility than anything else. I think that we're so locked in to a very materialistic way of doing things in Western technological culture at the moment. When we think of moving large blocks of stone, we think of cranes, we think of leverage, we think of machines. But we don't think of the power of the human mind. And precisely because we have become reliant on mechanical technologies, I think it's very likely that capacities that are inherently present within us have been allowed to lapse, that we're not encouraged to explore those capacities today in a way that perhaps other societies would have encouraged us to do. Excuse me a moment. And there are many accounts from the ancient world of large blocks of stone being moved with the use of sound or simply with the use of focused concentration. And rather than dismissing these as fanciful fairy tales, I think it's time we took them seriously. And you're right. The people who make this criticism, who say that Hancock is a lunatic because he thinks that human beings could move stuff with the power of their minds, they're not people who've ever had psychedelic experiences.
Not at all. Not at all. I really was, this came up with I did speak with family this week about your work, and we were kind of staying up late having a chat about generally that we are a materialistic society. And in the past, people relied on magical thinking as a way of life. Thinking in terms of magic was the norm. And we were kind of just observing that, perhaps magic really does exist when you accept it into your life in a certain way. One thing we were focused on was the oracle chamber. And are you familiar with the oracle chamber in Malta? It's a sound chamber in a cave that resonates at 111 hertz. Which is the same frequency that, this doctor used back in the 70s to get Pete Townsend off of heroin. But it's been used for healing. And we were, how do they just discover this? How are they able to attain this unless they're having some sort of magical thinking, or they're generally experimenting like crazy on these things? I think magic can exist in a sense when your society allows you to let it in.
Yeah, I think the magic is just another form of technology, actually. But it's one that our society has neglected. What we call magic is just another way of manipulating the physical realm.
That's right,
and a way that we have been taught to despise and disregard to our disadvantage. In the ancient world, it was seen in a much more practical way. And I think the magicians of the past were the scientists of the past, just as the shamans in hunter-gatherer societies today are the scientists of those societies. I mean, to go back to ayahuasca, to discover, as I said earlier on, dimethyltryptamine, which is the active ingredient, is not orally active. You can drink as much a tea made of the leaves that contain DMT, and drink as much as you want, and you won't have any effect. Because of this enzyme in the gut called monoamine oxidase, you need to inhibit that enzyme in order for DMT to become orally active. And to discover that in a hunter-gatherer society in the middle of the Amazon jungle is the result of scientific work. But excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough. It's the result of centuries, decades, thousands of years of exploration and experimentation. I know shamans in the Amazon who are so familiar with the properties of just thousands of different species of plants they are true scientists in every meaningful sense of the word. I don't know about this oracle chamber in Malta, by the way. I know some caves in Malta. I'm thinking of Gardalam Cave, but I'm not sure which cave you're speaking of.
Okay, cool. I mean, I'm glad I was able to turn you on to something, because there is an extent that's crazy. But there is an extensive network of chambers in Malta, and they use this one as sort of a healing center. And it's just crazy that nowadays, like, MRI technology is now proving that this specific frequency has healing properties. It's something we've needed to see it visually. As a society, we have to see it to believe it, so there's so much more of a burden of proof that we place upon ourselves. Whereas in the old days, that's sort of was the question we were all asking ourselves the other night. It was like, who the hell just came up with this? Where does this come from? And how do they carve the cave so perfectly that it's resonating at this frequency, and really having the same healing properties that we're using in modern hospitals?
Yes. Yeah. Again, it's a result of deep and detailed investigation of these possibilities in a way that our society doesn't do today. I think, for example, that study of the Great Pyramid of Egypt would be enormously enhanced if we were to consider such possibilities, the effect that the Great Pyramid has on human consciousness. And it's our consciousness, it's our brains that define everything about our bodies and our health. They control everything. And if we can adjust consciousness by all manner of different means, then we can adjust our reaction to illness and to health threats of all kinds. And I think the Great Pyramid is better understood in that way than as the tomb of some megalomaniac pharaoh. It's a huge device designed to impact and influence human consciousness.
You have to wonder if some of these it's pretty clear, at least, that some of these megalomaniacs are what has kind of obscured our view on the past. You think about the Sphinx and how, they're starting to prove there was water damage on the outside of it. Yet, at some point, some pharaoh came across and carved the face out and turned it into their likeness. I have the same questions about the pyramids. Were these built as graves to these kings, or were they originally built for some other reason and then repurposed because of ego?
I think it's possible that they were never used as tombs. There's roughly 100 pyramids in Egypt, and not in any single one of them has a definitive burial of a pharaoh ever been found. Not one. In fact, there was a case in the Step Pyramid of Zoser at Saqqara, where in one of the chambers, archaeologists came across a sealed sarcophagus, and they were so excited. They thought that finally they were going to prove that this was a tomb. So they carefully opened the sealed sarcophagus, and they found that it was completely empty. There was nothing inside it at all. So it did not in any way support the tomb theory. Whereas there's a sarcophagus in the so-called King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. It's a very interesting granite box. The chamber had to be built around it because it's too large to get in through the entrance passageway. It's obviously very important in there, but no burial was ever found within it. And I think it was a place for initiation, a place for meditation. I've had the privilege to lie in that so-called sarcophagus in total darkness for some considerable length of time. And I almost immediately went into a visionary state in there. And I think we will understand these ancient monuments much better if we realize that the ancients think in very different ways than we do. And we're creating these structures for profound purposes. I mean, probably the most profound and difficult question that any of us as human beings has to ask ourselves is, we all know we're mortal. We're going to die, for sure. I'm probably closer to it than you are, since I'm 73 years old. But it's the common destiny of us all. And the truth is, nobody has a clue what death really involves. What happens? What happens after death? Does consciousness just end with the physical body, or does it go on in some way? And the ancient Egyptians were a culture who put their best minds to work for 3,000 years on that problem. And they came up with a detailed inquiry and detailed results of the journey that the soul makes after death. And I believe that the Great Pyramid was part of that inquiry, that they were investigating the mystery of death. And that is not a morbid fascination. What it is what it requires you to do is then consider how you live your life. What do you do with this gift of life, this precious gift of life that the universe has given to you? Do you just waste it away accumulating, material goods and living a rich lifestyle? Or do you use it to grow and develop as a human being over the years? And there's no doubt to my mind that the ancient Egyptian teachings and the teachings of many ancient cultures around the world say that we've been given a precious opportunity to be born in a human body. And we must use that opportunity well. We must use the minds that have been given to us. We must question, we must inquire. And above all, we must recognize the mystery of it all. It's a great mystery to be alive, to have experiences, to be able to feel love, to be able to interact with other human beings and to make choices about how we interact with them. Those choices define us and define the lives we've lived.
It's just so awesome to hear that you and I are both peering into the same void, because I've obviously done my fair share of experimentation, and I've come out of it with some of these similar emotions, and a lot of my music is fixated on death and dream states and the human condition. And
One moment, there's a phone ringing. It'll get picked up in a second. There we go. It's gone.
There we go. Anyways, I made it a huge fixture of my music to focus on these points because I've experienced this, and because I really do, feel that I have true love within me.
Yes.
You tend to see it from that perspective. And so I love talking about this stuff, and it's such a different perspective to have you from more of a journalistic point of view.
Yeah.
And I'm coming from this poetic point of view, this musical point of view of the whole thing. Yet we're entering it from this same universe, going through these trips, going through these experiences, and coming out of it just enlightened almost.
Yes.
You have to wonder if these pyramids were used as a place of transcendence. Maybe the sarcophagi were full and they managed to escape their material world around them. That's a question on my mind.
Perhaps so. Although I suspect that living individuals were placed in that sarcophagus, and that they underwent a transformatory experience which changed the trajectory of their lives in every direction. I think partly, probably mainly, as a result of my experiences with psychedelics. Funnily enough, the first psychedelic experience I had was with LSD. And that was way back in 1974 when I was 20. I was probably still 23 years old. I might just have turned 24 at the time. And it was an accidental experience. I'd gone to a festival with a couple of friends, and we were given or bought one little tablet of acid, and we divided it up with a razor blade into 3 parts, and we had 1 part each. And I just had the most amazing, extraordinary, wonderful journey. I spent the entire night, 12 hours, wandering around that festival, visiting various campfires, talking with people. I felt that I'd been transported back in time. It was just a beautiful, powerful experience in every possible way. Sadly, the next day, the festival was broken up by the police quite violently. But the experience was one that I never forgot. It was a very powerful experience, but in my case, it was positive. In the case of one of my friends, it was extremely negative. He had a disastrous experience. He felt that the universe had just crumbled to stone around him and that there was no purpose or meaning in life whatsoever. And actually, his experience turned me off psychedelics for many years. I thought, my God, if the power of my LSD experience on that occasion were to go the other way, were to turn into a very negative and hostile experience, what would it do to me? And I became quite scared of them. And it was only really when I began to write a book that was eventually published in 2005. It's called Supernatural Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. It's been recently re-released as under the title of Visionary. It was only then that I actually had to take psychedelics again in order to write the book authentically. And that was the first time when I traveled to Peru in 2003 to drink ayahuasca. It was part of a research project. But the research project itself became so transformatory that I continued with that work. And since then I've had, well, I guess now with my last experience a month or two ago, I guess I've had certainly more than 75 journeys with ayahuasca. And yeah, it can be very hard work. It's physically very demanding. And sometimes you get nothing. I mean, sometimes there are no visions and nothing seems to happen. But the shamans in the Amazon, they call that a nada. And they say that these nadas are the most important experiences because what's happening at a subconscious level is even more important than what you're registering consciously. A lot of people who drink ayahuasca and don't have visions beat themselves up afterwards. I didn't have visions. What's wrong with me? But the shamans would say, no, everything's right with you. You know, when you're ready for the visions, you'll have them. But right now, this is what you need. And it's rightly said that ayahuasca doesn't always give you what you want, but she always gives you what you need.
You've been a responsible user of it, you know, going with a shaman. You know, I think one thing generally that I've done irresponsibly so is have so many psychedelic experiences unequipped, you know, and going in blind. You know, a lot of my own personal experiences with psychedelics have either been solo or with a group of friends in that regard. And I've had, you know, so many profound visions myself, but none of them under the guidance of somebody that you generally call an expert in this field.
Yeah. I think it's good to have a shaman or a facilitator there, somebody who knows the medicine, somebody who's worked with it a great deal, who understands its nuances. Things can go very wrong in psychedelic sessions. It's not all sweetness and light in the psychedelic garden. There can be problems and issues, and the role of the shaman is precisely to solve those problems, to keep the negative forces at bay. What I find with ayahuasca and with all psychedelics in general is that they cause us to lower our shields, to lower our barriers, and we become open to everything. And unfortunately, not everything out there in the multidimensional universe, not everything out there is good and kind and wishes us well. There are negative forces out there as well. And that's the shaman's role, is to keep those negative forces at bay and allow us to make the journey. And the second thing I think that is valuable is a ceremonial aspect to the experience. Whether you just do it alone or you do it with a group of friends or you do it with a shaman or a facilitator, there should be some sense that we're engaging in a sacred pursuit here. And the ancient cultures knew how to create the right kind of setting for these experiences to unfold. I mean, anybody who's worked regularly with psychedelics will know that the substance itself is only part of the mystery, that your state of mind at the time is also crucially important. And the setting, the place in which you have the experience is also crucially important. And it's bringing together all of these things in the right way where an experienced facilitator can be very helpful. I've not done a solo psychedelic journey. Except that first one with LSD where I just left the tent and spent 12 hours walking around. All my journeys have been in a ceremonial setting, even with psilocybin, with smoked DMT, with 5-MeO DMT. They've all been in a ceremonial setting with people who know what they're doing, and I find that valuable. I would say to anybody who's interested in exploring psychedelics that these are very powerful medicines, and they need to be treated with respect. And the approach we should take to them is what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this experience? I don't think it's, certainly for me, they're not not a recreational experience. There are other plant medicines that can be used for recreation, but psychedelics I don't think are particularly useful for recreation. I think they're useful for deep self-inquiry and exploration of the mystery of being alive.
Are you still smoking weed, or are you off of that now at this point?
Oh, I'm not. I'm not off it. I'm very much on it. I had a period from 2011 to 2014 where I quit weed, and that was because ayahuasca told me to quit it. Actually, ayahuasca basically gave me a strong message. I was overdoing it. It wasn't serving me. I was definitely becoming paranoid, suspicious. I doubted the motives of everybody around me. It wasn't helping me. And ayahuasca showed me that. And I always speak of ayahuasca as a being, and I think of her as a female entity. She made me quit, actually, for 3 years. I found it very difficult because I do love my cannabis, but I did quit for 3 years, and it was good. And then I was actually with Joe Rogan on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he asked me how we talked about this, and he asked me how it was doing, not using cannabis. And I said, well, I think maybe the time's come to dip my toes back in the water. At which point we were in California at that time, at which point he pulled out a joint and said, well, why don't you start now? So I smoked that joint with him, and I had a fantastic experience. Of course, after 3 years off, my tolerance level was very, very low. I got massively stoned very, very quickly, but I played the interview back and I managed to hold it together. I didn't start rambling and talking nonsense. I didn't forget my chain of thought, which often happens with weed. But I couldn't drive myself back afterwards. I had to call my wife and had to come and pick me up. Since then, yeah, I've become again a regular user of cannabis. I try to take breaks from it from time to time. And I try not to just use it on a routine basis, not to be stoned, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because the problem with that, again, is the high level of tolerance, and you need more and more and more and more to get the same effect. So it's good to take a tolerance break of a month or two here and there, and I do that. But I regard it as a positive part of my life. I would not consider writing a book these days without having the vaporizer handy. It's for two reasons. One because I find it helps my creativity. It shifts me out of that very rigid focus and allows me to think laterally in a way that I perhaps wouldn't do otherwise. And the second reason is being an author and sitting for 16 hours a day in front of a computer, although intellectually very stimulating, is physically very boring. And the cannabis helps to make it less boring. It helps to make it a time that I look forward to. Whereas one would not normally look forward to sitting in the same chair for 16 hours a day. So I find it a very beneficial medicine, but one like all these medicines to be treated with respect and regarded as a helper above all. And it certainly has helped me. I wouldn't want to go through the rest of my life without access to cannabis. It's one of the reasons I'm thinking of moving to America, actually.
Oh, that's great. I would love that. We have our own brand of weed for acid tongue that they're coming out with. Yes, there will be an acid tongue strain of weed available now on the East Coast. So I'm going to be able to, maybe not distribute it, but I'll have plenty on hand for you when you decide to make the move to the States.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky. We have family both on the East Coast in Massachusetts and on the West Coast in California, Los Angeles. And in both states, of course, cannabis, as it should be everywhere, is completely legal. The quality of the cannabis products is very high. I don't face any risk from the legal authorities in consuming it. I can be completely relaxed. And I think this is one of the great things that's happening in America. And I think it's something that, could only happen in America. Because individual states have the ability to make up their own minds on things like this and aren't controlled by central government, as unfortunately we are in Britain. I mean, the idea of a British county like Yorkshire, making cannabis legal while Westminster disagrees is completely impossible in Britain. I'm afraid Britain has a long way to go in consciousness change in sorting this problem out. So I look forward to enjoying some acid tongue cannabis at some point.
That's going to be a pleasure. I did have a question for you, um, sort of like we talk a lot about the past, that's a big topic of your work. But I am kind of wondering some of your views on the future. Like, let's talk specifically about your future, but also in general, the future for humanity. I think you had some brilliant things to say, not just about psychedelics, but about human development. And I'm kind of wondering, what it will take. What's sort of a signal for you from mainstream science that you've been really accepted into the norm, and where do you see your work going from here? What would be your vision for it?
Well, I think that the problem, the central problem across the world at the moment is the relatively low level of consciousness at which a great many human beings operate needlessly. And the fact that a low state of consciousness is encouraged by our governments and our leaders. I mean, why else would governments legalize alcohol, one of the most boring drugs on the planet, which is responsible for so much harm and damage and danger, while making cannabis or psychedelics illegal? The answer is obvious. These leaders, these governments want a population with a very low level of consciousness. They don't want us to elevate our consciousness in any way. And this is why I often say, if I were in a position to influence these matters, that I would absolutely insist that anybody who runs for a high leadership position must have 12 sessions of ayahuasca first. They can't apply for the job until they've done that.
I love it.
Maybe it doesn't even have to be ayahuasca. Could be LSD, could be psilocybin, but one of the big psychedelics. Could be smoke DMT, but 12 sessions, a minimum. Go through it. Go through that experience. I suspect that the majority of them wouldn't want to run for leadership positions anymore. They wouldn't want to lead people. They would want to guide, perhaps, to be helpful, but they wouldn't want to lead and dominate and control. And those who did go into leadership positions would be much kinder and much more generous and much more nurturing in the way that they behaved towards other human beings. So the horrible wars that are taking place on this planet today, the divisions that we've artificially created, we're all human beings. Human beings everywhere are fundamentally the same. I love the diversity of human cultures, and I cherish that, and I think it's valuable. But we need to recognize that at base, wherever a human being lives, we're all the same. We have the same hopes, the same fears, the same dreams, the same capacity for love, the same care for our children that every other human being on the planet has. And it's absurd that we should be making war upon one another for artificial, dogmatic, or ideological reasons. And we would not be doing so if the level of consciousness of the general population was higher, because leaders only get away with this obnoxious behavior because the population is allowing them to do so. And an elevated level of consciousness across the human race in general is the only way forward for our species. We've entered a stage now where we have these terrible technologies of destruction that exist in the world, and we're like immature children in control of devastating weaponry, and unfortunately we are using that devastating weaponry to destroy and murder one another on an enormous scale. And this cannot continue. The human race will not continue if we continue with this behavior. We need to recognize not only our diversity but also our unity, and we need to value that unity. And I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. I'm not a fan of government. I think government is responsible for so many of the problems in the world today. So the last thing I want to see is some kind of world government. I hate that idea. It's a horrible idea. But what I do want to see is a world unity where people respect one another as human beings, and where we value our differences from one another, and see that as part of the great tapestry of the human experience, rather than using those differences to divide us from one another. Otherwise, we won't have a future. We've reached the place now we don't need an asteroid to hit the Earth. We can destroy human civilization overnight in a nuclear war. And unfortunately, crazy though it seems, insane though it seems, a nuclear war is possible in this world today. And the reason that it's possible is precisely because of this low level of consciousness that is dominating humanity. And this is where psychedelics have a huge role to play in changing the future for everyone.
I love it. I think it's on my mind a lot. My family's from Mexico, and I've spent quite a bit of time down there, and I've been to many of the ancient sites that you've discussed. Yeah. And one thing I did observe, though, is how dangerous psychedelics are in the wrong hands. You know? And I know you've discussed it, but they could be at the root of what tore apart Mexican society before the Spanish even entered in there. We talk about human sacrifice, you're
making a very good point. Because there's no doubt that psychedelics were used by the Aztecs, by the Mexica, in a very negative way. And I think what they did is, as I mentioned earlier on, the universe is not all sweetness and light. There are negative entities out there as well as positive entities, and they allowed those negative entities in. And psychedelics were used to allow those negative entities in. So we should always be aware of this possibility with psychedelics, and our conscious intent in the use of psychedelics should always be love and nurture and care. And the moment that we make our point of view loving and nurturing and caring, that's the moment when we can't do harm to other people anymore and would never consider the kind of things that the Aztecs did. That being said, it's important to recognize that the Spanish who came into Mexico were also monsters and did monstrous things. And while Cortez and his little army who took over Mexico in 1521, they proclaimed themselves to be horrified by the human sacrifices that the Aztecs were carrying out. But what was Christianity doing when it burned people at the stake? If not carrying out human sacrifices, they were burning those people in honor of their God. They were no different from the Aztecs in that respect. So it's the state of mind that we have when we go into these experiences that matter so much.
And it's crazy because Cortez also may have been under the influence of psychedelics at some point, right? If I'm not mistaken, is that
I'm not sure about that. I've not come across any evidence of that. I've studied Cortez quite closely, and he comes across primarily as a manipulator, a very very clever, cunning adversary who learned what he could about Aztec culture in order to destroy it. Whether he ever had psychedelic experiences himself, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. It's certainly possible that it did, but it didn't affect his behavior in any positive way. He was an extremely negative force, and indeed the Spanish in general were a negative force across the whole of the Americas, as were Anglo cultures as well. This invasion of the Americas, this destruction of Native American cultures that took place after 1492, it was just devastating in every way, and we wiped out so many of our memories as a species in that process. I don't know. I mean, it's all part of human history, and the time has come to learn these lessons of the past and to find a way to move forward into the future, which is not so cruel, not so unkind, not so unhelpful, but where we seek to help one another rather than hurt one another.
Do you think that there are still, I know we lost a lot of native documents in that time, and I'm just wondering if there is still the potential to find some of these pieces, to find some evidence of this previous society, because I know even in South America and Central America, they believe there is society stretches so much further back than is generally accepted. And within the native cultures, they speak about this verbally, it's part of the oral traditions, and they just don't have the documentation to prove it. That's something that Cortez and the Spanish destroyed.
They deliberately destroyed it. There was one bonfire in which 5,000 Mayan codices were burnt, God knows what we lost then. What was lost in those documents? The few fragments of Mayan codices that have survived have extraordinary stories to tell, which suggest that a much older origin for these civilizations than they're given credit for. And the Spanish wanted to wipe all of that out. You know, it's why they built their churches on top of sacred sites. The Great Pyramid of Cholula has a Spanish cathedral sitting on top of it. It was like, you know, they were dominating the ancient culture. They were controlling it and seeking to diminish it in that way and to turn it to their own objectives.
This is one reason I think it's so absurd that you've been accused of any sort of racism in your work, because at the end of the day, you were trying to take the story back and put it in the hands of the natives. And you're asking the world to generally listen to these people, to believe what they have to say, when Western culture, Western society is saying, no, we've got a better idea. We know what's going on. Like, we understand this. Don't take psychedelics like they tell you. Yes. Don't engage in forest management. Let's just let fucking forest fires burn and rage, exactly. You know, like that is Western culture.
Yeah. Western culture and its greed, which is leading to the destruction of the entire Amazon rainforest. You know, I've just come back from Brazil, from Acre province in Brazil. And in that province, land is being cleared on an enormous scale. Old growth rainforest is being burnt down and turned into cattle farms. And this is a terrible mistake, which something needs to be done about. Now, I understand that the poverty-stricken people of Brazil, who are desperate to have some form of living, they see the Amazon as a resource. They can go there, they can cut down or burn down the trees, and they can make a farm there. But it's very, very short term. And again, this is an area where the world needs to come together and say, look, in the Amazon, we have a precious resource of biological diversity, of ancient ideas that have been preserved for thousands and thousands of years, of incredibly sophisticated knowledge of plants and of the environment. We must not allow this to be destroyed. If people are destroying it for economic reasons, then we should help them out of their economic problems so that they don't need to destroy the Amazon. Instead of giving aid, you know, let's just pay people not to destroy the Amazon. This would be a very cost-effective method of preventing the destruction of the Amazon. It's only being done for economic reasons, and the Western technological cultures have the resources to prevent that from happening. Not physically prevent it, but just make it economically attractive for people not to destroy the Amazon. Would be so easy to do, but unfortunately, it's not happening.
These are the lungs of our planet, so it's shocking. It's sort of like a smoker who just disregards their health. You know, yeah. I think generally as a society, we're just completely bombarding our lungs with smoke at the moment.
Absolutely, and again, it's low consciousness. It's a very narrow and limited vision. It's thinking ahead only 3 or 4 years, not thinking ahead hundreds or thousands of years. And that's what we need to be doing as a species if we wish to continue. You know, if we want to go the way of the dinosaurs, then we're going to carry on the way we're carrying on now. But if we want humanity to continue into the future, then we radically have to change our mindset and the way that we function as a society.
You know, I kind of see it like, again, as we are a society focused on materialism, nuclear power kind of can go both ways. It holds the power to completely destroy us in the form of nuclear weapons, or it can save us if we start harnessing the energy in the correct manner and trying to have a low emission form of energy. Yeah. And I think similarly, psychedelics are a similar form of technology. You know, they have the danger to completely be our downfall. But if we manage to harness these things in an effective and sane and moral manner, it really will carry us into the next millennium, you know?
Absolutely. This is why the war on drugs, as it's called, has been such a disastrous influence in our societies, has spread so many lies and so much confusion around the subject of psychedelics. I regard the war on drugs as one of the most evil influences in our society in the past century. It's just been a terrible thing. Really, since the time of Richard Nixon, just an awful thing that has caused so much damage. And it's why, as people explore psychedelics now, that they're not able to do so in appropriate settings. where wise advice is available, where people who know what they're dealing with are available to help them. What I'm observing in Western societies is that Western cultures are developing their own form of shamanism, that there are people who are stepping up and taking on the shaman role in Western societies. So it's possible to have a beautifully guided ayahuasca session in, for example, California, with people who really know what they're doing and create a beautiful ceremony and a beautiful setting for these things to happen. But all of this has been hindered and held back by the horrors of the war on drugs. My view is that that every sovereign adult should have the right, the absolute right, to make sovereign decisions about what they do with their own bodies and their own minds and their own health, so long as they cause no harm to others. This is the next step forward that we need to take. We cannot hand over the keys of our consciousness to our governments, to our low consciousness governments, whose purpose is to keep us down and prevent us from thinking for ourselves.
I think this is going to make great material for the song. I don't know if you know about this podcast, but I am going to have to be tasked with pulling a song together from this conversation after this.
I hope you do. Can I tell you that I actually started out writing songs? That was my beginning.
You did?
Yeah. That was my beginning. I hated school and I didn't understand why I was there. I didn't really connect with it at all. But then I found I started to play the guitar and I found a friend who had a great singing voice. And we worked together and we wrote songs today. I've still got the books of songs that we wrote way back then. And that's when I began to write. It was writing songs. And then eventually, as we got older, we went off and started playing in pubs, kind of open mic. Believe me, playing in a tough pub in the northeast of England teaches you to have an audience. It was the beginning for me. All my writing started with that, and I still think that songs are a fantastic medium for getting really profound and important ideas across. I've shifted away from songs; I don't write them anymore. But I'm still writing, and I would never have started writing at all if it hadn't been for the songs that entered my life at that time.
That's brilliant. We're so like-minded in that regard, because I do perceive songwriting as this powerful medium, and I do still think it can be a force of nature. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate that insight about your life. That's awesome. This has been such a fucking brilliant combo, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to really lay things out with us.
Really, really great. Well, thank you for calling me up and making this happen. I very much enjoyed talking to you, and let's stay in contact. And
I would love that. I
want to try some of that acid tongue weed one of these days.
Yeah. You'll have to let me know if you come to Washington State or Oregon, because I will be there in a heartbeat. And I know that there's quite a bit of geological sites that you intend to visit at some point in your career. So we would be happy to host you.
I expect to be in both Washington State and Oregon during the course of 2024. So I'll
beautiful. That would be such a dream. That would be such a dream to host you.
Cool. Excellent. Well, look, lovely to talk to you. And I wish you luck with all your projects, and carry on changing the world with the words of your songs.
Thank you so much, Graham. You've been a pleasure to speak with. This has been so wonderful.
Thanks so much, Graham. That was really good. So inspiring.
Good. I hope it's useful to you. I've really enjoyed it. Lovely to talk to you, Guy. Thank you.
Hey, it was great talking to you. I'm glad that you really were able to open up about some of these things. I wasn't sure how it would go over. So, I just thought it was great material, and we kind of got something new out of it too, which was really cool.
Yeah, new for me too. I really enjoyed it. Okay.
We'll send you the song as soon as it's done.
Yes, we'll send you the song soon.
Please do.
Beautiful.
Right. See you guys.
Have a good one.
I'm going to press the leave button.
All right.
Good. Sounds good.
Well done. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Oh man, Jack, thank you for making my dream come true.
You're welcome, mate. You did a fantastic job. Super professional interview.
Oh, really? You liked it?
Oh, yeah.
That's
really
awesome. Good. Oh my God. He had so much to say. I couldn't believe he went into the telekinesis.
Yeah. I mean, it was and it's for somebody that doesn't, maybe the first time hearing him, he left with such a positive message for, world unity, and it went further than just, Atlantis or whatever, lost civilizations, but
how we barely had to touch on it because it's so out there already that this was such a better conversation for my audience. I think we got some new insights out of him. And I couldn't believe, like, right at the end, he's like, I used to be a musician. Like, that was fucking crazy.
I didn't know that. That wasn't in his bio or anything.
I know. Oh my God. Brilliant. Wow. That was too cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
so
happy.
You're inspired?
You know what? Sometimes you do have to do your homework. That's what I'm going to say about that. I'm glad I did.
Inspired me. You had so many great, like that idea that the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, but they just used it, took it over as a burial site.
That's right. Yeah.
That makes such sense to me. I mean, that's because that's happened like in so many other places and other temples throughout history.
It was cool. I'm glad that he, like, I don't know, there were so many times where I just threw something out there and he just rolled with it. You know what I mean? And that was so cool to hear his take on that stuff. It was sort of like, I don't know, it was like he was jumping out of the screen at me.
Yeah.
And just like really in the convo, you can tell that we both have taken psychedelics because there was just this weird train of thought going.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It was a classic episode. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of people going to hear this, who don't know your band, and I think they will check it out afterwards. So, yeah, we're going to work on a song now.
I do. So just so I can ask some questions real fast, what is the deadline on the song?
Well, there's no deadline now.
Okay.
But the sooner you do it, the better, because otherwise...
Do you master it? Or do I need to get it mastered first?
Well, we have a production team in Italy. We've got a drummer. We can, if you doesn't want the band to do everything, we could,
Okay, great.
Play on it,
That's what I'm hoping for. Is what I'll do is I'll assemble stems at home.
Okay.
I record on my laptop. I have gear at home and everything. And so I can make a majority of the things sound really great and then send you guys the pieces of it. I can do a bounce of it, plus send all of the individual files, and just see what works, from there.
That's what we did with Death Valley Girls, because for them to go in the studio and record drums was very expensive. And so we just, we did the backing track and she sang on it. But, you can do a lot more. So whatever you can do, take it as far as you can. And then we'll introduce you to the guys, and they'll be super happy to work with you on it.
Oh, that's
Italian
so cool.
combo.
That's awesome. That's up my alley. You know that I play with like different musicians depending on where I'm at in the world.
Right. I've seen that you have a revolving group.
Yeah. I got musicians in London, in Paris, friends in Italy. And so, just the last year and a half alone, I played with people from like probably 5 or 6 different countries, it's just so much cheaper to travel that way.
Yeah.
So we really developed a taste for it. And it also keeps me really, it's so funny. We were talking about connecting with people with him, because that's really what it's all about. Like I give my musicians a lot of license to put their own spin on my songs when we perform live. Mm-hmm. So people keep wanting to do it. And when the band keeps getting shuffled up, every time I go on tour, I don't burn out as easily, because I'm like, okay, we got fresh faces, a fresh take on the music, it's really fun. So I love this idea of collaborating with your crew,
Okay. Well, you're the living proof that these psychedelics are working, because you're so, you're active and open-minded and creative. I know you get burnt out sometimes. I know you said in your last release, you're going through cold turkey on a few things. And
oh yeah, I had to quit drinking like 3.5 years ago. That was good for me. That was a good thing. Yeah. Yeah. When are you coming out to Seattle and going to Freak Out? When are you gonna do that? You gotta make a plan.
Okay, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll enjoy it. It's pretty cool.
Well, likewise, if you ever need any gigs in Italy, if you ever want to tour over here.
Yeah, dude. What part of Italy are you in?
We're in the south, so there's not much money down here, and
that's cool.
Yeah. But
sometimes you just gotta visit. I'll be out in Europe on a full tour this summer.
Okay.
So I'll keep in touch and let you know when I'm on the road. Maybe we meet you part way somewhere, or come down to you. It'd be really cool.
All right, mate. Well, let's keep in touch. And
all right, dude.
Let me know how the song goes.
I will. We'll talk soon. Okay.
All right, mate.
Thanks again for everything. You're the coolest. I appreciate this so much, man. Thank you.
No worries. Take care,
I'll
mate.
talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I can see you, bright as the sun. Oh, you're a teacher. Yeah, she's a teacher. Clear as I see, wave after wave, space after space. Oh, she's a teacher. Yeah, she's a teacher, taking the lead. In a million pieces, my thoughts dissolve. Time is an ocean, my body's a sail. It's illuminating, and I feel so small. Hold hands with creation, a profound ideation. Color me pink, color me black. Oh, she's a teacher. Yeah, she's a teacher. Keep me on track. Is it the drugs, or is it in me? Or are you my teacher? Oh, you're a teacher, clear as I see. Painted on the ceiling, show me what you mean. Glitter and thunder pulls me down under. Tell me how much further my brain can stretch. Hold hands with creation, a profound ideation. Hold hands with creation. Hold hands with creation, a profound ideation. Hold hands with creation.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the song and the episode. The song will be released next week. Will be available on all streaming platforms, but you can already pre-save. Please support the artists by following them on social media and adding the song to any playlists you have. This is a completely free show, and you've listened this far, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pay us back by clicking like and subscribe. And follow at Podsongs on social media platforms, or subscribe to the newsletter at podsongs.com for special updates. Or just tell the next person you see about this amazing show where musicians interview their idols and write a song about them. The songs are available for download from the Podsongs website as well, which pays a lot more than the 0.00 whatever we get from Spotify. You can also email me at jack@podsongs.com to give feedback, suggest an artist and guest combos you'd like to hear, or just say hello. We're a listener-supported show, and I'd love to hear from you. A final thanks to my researchers, Dori Verbo and Rosa Marino, my producer, Maurizio Sanicola of Goldmine Records, and musicians Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcione. The next episode will be out soon. In the meantime, you can listen to more amazing episodes in the archives. Until then, Have a great day.